Morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here in person, those that are here, and also thanks to everybody who's watching online. I want to kick off today as a process about budget guidelines with a little bit of context. The budgeting process in the state of North Dakota occurs every 2 years, and one of the things that we've had great leadership and participation from OMB and all the agencies broadly. This is the fourth time in state history where we've started the budgeting process with a strategic planning process. The strategic planning process is meant to do one thing, which is have strategy drive budget. And by strategy, what do we mean? By strategy, we talk about, what is the role and the mission of state government? Who are the customers, the citizens that we're serving? How can we provide them with the services that they need and want, and do that more effectively than we've done in the past? So understanding strategy, it starts with understanding who the customer is, and it also undertakes, you have to say, what is the best way to actually accomplish that, the most efficient way. So lots of fantastic ideas and innovations have come through that strategic planning process over the three prior ones. This year was equally as energizing and equally as interesting. Before, 74 separate meetings were held. And attending those meetings were folks from the governor's office, the OMB staff, folks from NDIT attended all of those, and also from the HR side of OMB, because we wanted to look at the people side of things, the information management side of things, and as well as the budget side of things, to make sure that we were supporting all of our many agencies, including all of our elected officials, as well, that have their own operations that they're running. So anyway, with that all coming together, today is that point in the process where we've completed the strategic planning portion, and then we issue the guidelines out to all the agencies. So this isn't the budget, this is the guidelines for the budget. So this is basically a process step that we're discussing today. And I do, as I go through this, one thing that's been fantastic in sitting through the vast majority of these now, close to 300 strategy meetings over the last four cycles, is you come away with an incredible appreciation for the amazing work that state team members do every day, and the breadth of what state team members do, because there isn't a citizen in our state that goes through their daily activities that doesn't have multiple interactions with the work that the state of North Dakota is doing. And that could start in the morning when they get up and they're driving on a road, and that road probably's got a nexus back to the state DOT system. And then they drop a kid off at K-12, and we're deeply, deeply involved as the primary funder at the state level of all K-12. And they may have other kids that are going to one of our great 11 higher education institutions. And then on the weekend, they may decide they want to go, fishing or camping, and then along the way they got to register their boat and register their car. Now they've just touched four more agencies. So we touch the breadth of everything, and hopefully they don't have health issues, but if they do, there's probably a nexus back to health and human services. And we could go on and on and on, whether it's getting a book out of a library or being involved in any of the other activities we have across the state. You're probably touching a state agency and a dedicated state team member that's working to support that. So I do want to begin with gratitude for all the hard work and dedication of all the state employees that keep everything running smoothly. But I also want to thank, from the fiscal standpoint, there's just a huge amount of work that goes into preparing the budget. And while I have said this is the fourth time, I need to be clear that because of what went on at the federal level in terms of both COVID and other things, we had two interims where we also had to redo budgets during that period of time like we've never had before. So it wasn't like there was a year on, year off. We had a stretch there where we did one a year for 4 years, that's not had happened before in state history. But a fantastic team of OMB analysts and fiscal agents across all the agencies. So thanks to all of them. And again, when we've done this work, we've identified savings, we've identified how we can improve delivery of essential services, we've found ways to do that more efficiently, and we've found ways to lower taxes, because through all of this work, we've been increasing services to an increasing number of citizens, and at the same time, we've been lowering both income and property taxes for the state of North Dakota. We've been lowering income taxes. We've been subsidizing property taxes, which sometimes still go up, but that's a local decision. But I would say we're grateful for all that work, and we do talk about the 6 words that we really drive towards every day, which is empower people, improve lives, and inspire success. When we began this process of setting out the guidelines, we talked about what some of those components were going to be, and one of the things that we talked about was the whole of government approach. Because when we've had such great participation from the leaders that have come in and said, hey, this is an activity in our agency, but we think it really belongs in someone else's agency. And so we've had great collaboration instead of people trying to strengthen and build silos and build empires and build moats around them. We've just seen great work from people saying, hey, how do we all work together to serve the citizens of the state? And that's led to some very positive changes and efficiencies over time. So whole of government was one of those approaches. One thing I did mention was our North Dakota's growing population. Well, as we got the slide up here, these are all the agencies there that did participate. And again, many of them they've got very specific missions, but don't maybe receive a lot of notoriety because they work with very specific things. And I think about the school for the deaf, or the work that we're doing with those that have got vision impairment that go beyond the students in their organizations, but they're serving citizens of all ages across the state. There's really amazing things going on, and one thing for sure is that we can do a better job at the state level of helping the citizens understand all the amazing work that's happening. But thanks to all those agencies. But we do have a growing population, and people, I think forget this, and maybe this gets forgotten sometimes in the budgeting process when people say, oh, that the budget is growing in North Dakota, like that's a bad thing. Well, part of growth comes from we're serving more people, and the period of time that we've had in the last decade and a half is not any kind like we've had since pre-1930. I mean, North Dakota held the very interesting population statistic that we alone held out of all 50 states, which is when we were in the early 2000s there through 2005, 75 years after the census of 1930, we're the only state in the nation that had a lower population in 2005 than we had in 1930. So 75 years of flat to declining growth could lead us to a mentality or an idea that, hey, we live in a place of scarcity. Our small towns were shrinking, people were moving to big towns, and that we locked into that. But now we actually have entered a period of abundance, and that's reflected in the growth and the vibrancy of our economy and the growth of the people. It's moved us from a state where young people were leaving to where our population has gotten much younger. We're now among the top in terms of most youngest states in the nation, which is a great thing for family formation. We have been among the highest in terms of birth rate, which is an indication of families that are choosing to stay here and work here and grow their families here. And then we've also set a new record in terms of population. And when we think about that population, we've added 110,000 residents just since 2010. And another way to think about that is more than all the residents of Bismarck and Mandan, those two cities. Take those two cities, then you can almost toss in a full Jamestown on top of that, is what we've done. So if you think, oh, we can, state government can just stay flat in terms of spending, but what about these the new population equivalencies of a city of Bismarck, city of Mandan, city of Jamestown on top of that? So that's what's driving it, and we'll talk about that a bit, because some things that we do in state government relate to formulas, and when we have more people, there's going to be upward pressure. But that population drives demand for traditional governor services, and whether that's education with more kids in K-12, behavioral health, social supports for the vulnerable, population does drive that demand, and we're happy to be growing as a state, and we're happy that we've got places like McKenzie County that was the fastest growing county in the country on a percentage basis between 2010 and 2020. But the good news is our economy has continued to grow as well, and it was just reported recently that North Dakota had the highest GDP growth year over year of any state in the nation. So we continue to not only have a larger economy, substantially larger, but also one that continues to grow, and that is, credit goes first to the first to the private sector, because we don't have a growing economy if we don't have private sector investment that's investing in value-added ag and value-added energy and developing all the incredible natural resources. We don't have it if we don't have companies that are starting biotech companies and software companies and UAS companies in this country. And that private capital formation drives job demand and helps create, again, value-added opportunities. It's particularly important in agriculture and energy, because often a state like ours, historically, for the first 130 years, we had natural resources and we had agriculture, but when we were growing a crop and just shipping it out of here on a train load of soybeans or train load of corn, going to another state, or if we had oil and we're just putting it in a pipeline and shipping it out and not adding any value to it, then we really are just in a position to get whipsawed by global commodity prices. So one of the things that we focused on strongly in the last 7 years is how do we diversify the economy in the state, and we've had great success. I mean, we've gone from 0 soybean crush plants to now 3 that are up and going. That's $1 billion of capital investment by outside companies. But when those plants are operating, it also raises the basis that everybody that grows soybeans in the state gets paid. Same thing as our ethanol industry has continued to grow in the state. That's helped us. So, and we become more of a corn and soybean state. That helps on the ag side. On the energy, we've always done well, but doing more efficient work on the energy side. And now with the over $60 billion of potential projects coming to North Dakota, because we've got energy, because we've got electricity here, when we have those resources and the ability to produce those, it attracts capital. And one example is the $1.2 billion data center that's being built in Ellendale, North Dakota, with all the latest NVIDIA chips. And they're coming because we've got electricity, we've got wind power, and we've got baseload energy, and they want to be close to that. And there was a housing issue in Ellendale. Probably not a lot of new houses built there in the last few decades, but the company is building 30 new single-family homes in Ellendale, in a town of 1,100 people, to support their growth. And that location was specifically chosen by them because of access to electricity. So there's a lot of positive things that are pointing towards our growth in our economy continuing to move forward. We have a goal to have the highest gross domestic product per capita. Currently, we're at 5th. Some of those folks ahead of us are states that have things like Silicon Valley and Wall Street that help drive their numbers up. But we can continue to move and grow that, but it's not by accidents. If we provide the right infrastructure, the right research and development partnerships, and also if we've got a low regulatory and low tax environment, the capital is going to continue to move to North Dakota. So that's positive. One of the challenges we have is inflation, and just like every family in our state is feeling the effects of inflation, where we've got higher costs for put food on your table and gas in your car and pay for your electricity. North Dakota's done better, but nationally the cost of electricity is up over 30% and will continue to increase as demand for electricity goes up from things like AI and supply goes down because of regulatory constraints. I expect that that's going to be something, and the state of North Dakota has got an electric bill that we pay as well. So any of the things that we're less affected by as food, because we're not feeding that many state employees, but we're in the construction business. We build lots of roads and lots of water projects every year. That's part of the capital expense that flows through the state budget, goes towards infrastructure. And our leaders in DOT and our director of water can tell you that we've got projects that are coming back as 30% or more higher than what they were just 3 years ago. So the inflation is going to continue to drive. It drives up labor pricing as well, and that is a factor that affects our budget. So we're managing through this, but you can see that line had pretty. It was steady growth, but it was in that 2% to 2.5% for a number of years, which is where the Fed was trying to target. And then, of course, we've been way above that growth rate for the last 3 years. We haven't seen that kind of a line of the effects of high inflation since the early 1980s. And we have a few legislators that might remember those days, but this is something new when we think about budgets this year. We just have to accept the fact that there's going to be inflation baked into some of that. In terms of building a strong workforce, it continues to be the most important limiting factor of our continued growth in the state. The numbers of workers in North Dakota is increased slightly, but it does limit our opportunity. We have the lowest unemployment in the state, in the nation right now at 2%, and we've got among the highest workforce participation. We're always in the top 3 on that, and so people aren't staying at home; they're participating. But we've still got a low unemployment rate. When you have low unemployment and a lot of jobs open, which we do, there's still a plentiful number of jobs available right now in the state. Those are something that does drive wage growth up. And when we think about everybody in this room that's here and watching online that runs a state agency knows how tough hiring is right now, and they know that even with the equity increases that we were able to put in last time to help support all of our state team members, we know that in many cases the private sector is paying higher prices than state government. That's not a good long-term strategy for good government to be not competitive in terms of getting great folks to come work for state government if they've got better opportunities in the private sector. So there is going to be wage pricing is still going to be something that affects budgeting going forward. This number that is shown here is the one that is trapped out of this comes from some labor modeling, but also we track this in North Dakota Job Service. But we do know that these numbers always understate the number of jobs open, because if a company has, say, 100 nursing positions open, they might only post 5 of those. So we feel confident that the number is usually double than this, but it's safe to say that there's over 30,000 jobs available in North Dakota right now. And with the guidance of the Workforce Development Council, we've made some great investments, broad-based, that have touched our budget, whether that's supporting child care availability, affordability, and quality. We know that that's been a factor of people when they find a job here, they like a community here. Sometimes they say, hey, I want to move, but I can't move because I've got a child care spot in the state we're in. We don't have one coming there. K-12, we got to continue to we're driving dollars in there relative to the CTE in particular, because we've got to make sure that our education systems, both K-12 and higher education, are producing people who can jump into our workforce and fill these important jobs. And so as we work on expanding apprenticeship programs and the ability to learn anywhere, we want to make sure that anybody in our workforce at any age, not just high school students, but they're ready for a choice in a career and technical career, whether they want to get advanced education through college or master's degrees, or maybe they want to serve in the military or the North Dakota National Guard. So we have to, again, keep focusing, and we have lots of things that we do in state government and in the budget to try to support everybody in North Dakota being choice ready for their careers. And so with that, we do that because we know that workforce drives economic activity, and with economic activity, that drives prosperity. And with that prosperity, then we have an opportunity to have lower taxes for everybody because we've got stronger activity. What that relates back to, all of these things, these puts and takes of good growth and inflationary pressures, is back to the general fund. The general fund in our state, if you look at this slide, is actually lower than it was in 2013 and 2015. I'm confident that there is likely maybe only 1 or 2 other states, and maybe none, that are actually running a general fund appropriations below where they were over a decade ago. And this is a credit to North Dakota, credit to our legislature, credit to the administration and everybody as part of it. And so that's amazing to sort of say, wow, we've got 110,000 more people, our economy is a third larger, and somehow our state government is smaller. So it is, again, a fantastic story of what having a low tax and low regulatory environment, driving things through the private sector, not just expanding government, but making government more efficient, is really on display here in North Dakota, and that's a giant team effort. The overall budget, continues to grow in North Dakota because we've just had such a huge influx, particularly during COVID, of federal funds and special funds. But those are things that we accept coming in, like federal fund grants that were competitive and we win those. But the spending that is really controlled by the legislatures in the general fund, and that's what we're focusing on today, the things that we can control. I mentioned formulas earlier, but this is going to be a challenge. We've got formulas which drive big dollars. K-12, 27% of that budget. That's a big number. Higher ed formula, smaller number. And we've got the Medicaid formula. And of course, what I should point out here, when we do the K-12, all of that $1.6 billion through that formula. We've also got payments that go out K-12 from the Common Schools Trust Fund, over $500 million. And so you've got over $2 billion that are going to K-12. All of that every biennium is just property tax relief. Most states, the state does not pay 75 or 80% of local K-12. North Dakota, we do. And so it is but that's a formula in higher ed, and then Medicaid formula. So then people say, well, cut budgets. Well, you want to cut budgets. Legislature controls the formulas that are there. That's going to be in their court to change or modify those formulas to stop the growth that is just coming with a higher population, and it's sort of an increasing appetite to take on more and more of the local share. Often with no restraints on what the local spending is. But then all other is everything else. That's fish and game. That's highway patrol. That's law enforcement. It's parks and rec. It's you name it. It's libraries. So the budgeting process in North Dakota, not unlike the federal level, gets very difficult, because then people say, well, why don't you just cut these big numbers? Well, you end up trying to take it all out of the groups that are providing the services that everybody enjoys and thinks about in terms of their state government. So I just want to highlight that, because this creates a challenge for anybody doing budgeting. In the past, we've been successful at managing that number down from where it was before to where it was through the guidelines, and that's what we're here to talk about today. When we first got into office, we suggested a full 10% cut, and then the next time around we did 90 to 95% of that lower 95% number. Then we went to 85 to 95% of that other lower number. So we were, instead of compounding up, we were compounding down, and the state agencies were fantastic. People came up with great ideas about how to take cost out of government. And then this last year, under tremendous inflationary pressure, particularly on the wage labor side, and also the constraints that we've had in some of the things related to workforce, whether that was workforce education or whether it was childcare, we made investments, because we just felt like, hey, we could get government smaller, but if we do, our economy is going to get smaller, because we're not going to have the workforce to keep our economy going. So there was some strategic decisions there, but that, as I said, when you look at the actual raw numbers, it still keeps us below a spot where we were back over a decade ago. So we believe that reductions on the budget guidelines are an important tool to drive innovation. And so today we're issuing guidelines that are going to ask agencies to tighten their belts, just as our citizens have had to tighten their belts because of the high cost of goods and services created by high inflation. And we realize that, asking agencies to cut budgets may seem, counterintuitive to some people, because there's a lot of attention to how well we have built up our rainy day funds and our reserve funds, which is great that we've been able to do that. But some of those that are in those things are reserved for specific things. Common Schools Trust Fund is all specifically dedicated towards supporting K-12. The Legacy Fund, as you know, has got some ability for the legislature to have flexibility with the earnings that come off of that, but that is meant to continue building for into the future at a time when we may not have the natural resources tax revenue that we do today. So I'm happy that we're able to stand here today and say our budget, our balances in our reserve funds have never been higher, but that still doesn't mean that with the dollars that are available in terms of the cash that we can spend in each biennium, that we don't have to be continually thinking about how do we do our jobs more efficiently. And so our citizens have been forced to economize, and state government will through this exercise be working to do the same. But the one thing that I do also want to say to that is that sometimes when you've got constraints, it forces innovation. And while we saw a lot of fantastic ideas that came out through the process of the strategic planning, we know that there are still ideas and opportunities. And it is not in particular, because I think that every state employee does their work trying to do the very best they can for the state. but I have never met a state employee that says 100% of what I do is absolutely adding a great value to citizens. If you're a leader of any agency and you talk to your team, you're going to find out that could be 5 or 10% of what they do is got some mind-numbing work that is really what I would put in the bucket of red tape, where they're performing a thing, creating a report that maybe nobody ever reads. And so part of what we're doing on a search when we cut for red tape, we're trying to cut not just bureaucratic rules and regulations, we're also trying to get rid of that work that is not adding any value. And when we get rid of that work that's not adding value, then guess what? We actually make the jobs for our team members more purposeful, which is going to help us in recruiting, because we are facing a demographic cliff in the next 5 years where lots of baby boomers are going to be retiring from state government, and in some agencies it's as high as 30% of the people will be retiring. And when we go out to go try to fill those jobs with people in their 20s, we have to be offering them purposeful work. And the way we do that in part is by cutting the red tape, but then also with automation and augmentation. There's still places when I look at from the IT standpoint where we still are doing things that are too much paperwork and too much the way we were doing it 20 or 30 years ago. And of course we've been trying to attack some of that with what we call tech debt, but we're reaping the I don't want to say not the benefits, it's the opposite, but we're reaping the cost today of probably 30 plus years of underinvestment in technology. I mean, we're trying to now at great expense retire 2 mainframes that Ed Schaefer called for in his budget address to get rid of back in the year 2000. So you delay that another 24 years and the cost just keeps going up and up and up and up on some of these things. So with that tech debt, that is by not investing in automation and augmentation and having that big tech debt, then people kind of say, wow, you're asking us to go down, but you're spending more on IT. Well, the IT benefits are something we have to have if we're going to end up operating at a level of efficiency that we need to serve all of our customers. So we are doing ours in the budget thing. We're asking agencies to focus on cutting red tape. We're asking people to think about what we can automate and eliminate from work, what we can do to make things more purposeful. We are, in this budget, going to be talking about how the state will pick up the extra increases in IT costs so that each agency doesn't have to have a battle over you're asking me to cut, but now you're asking me to pay more for IT. No, we're saying that's going to be covered through through the centralized allocation. But with that, we hope to get better outcomes. That's the whole purpose here of this thing, is to make sure that we've got better outcomes for citizens. In terms of the principles for the executive budget guidelines, again, through the whole process of strategic planning and through this, it's pretty simple, which is we want people to not focus on the budget, but start with what outcomes are we trying to drive? Are we trying to drive better educational outcomes, better safety outcomes? Are we trying to drive to get to Vision Zero? Are we trying to have better experiences and more access for people to enjoy the outdoors in North Dakota, whether it's hunting or fishing or camping or recreation? We've got to just keep focusing. Who is the citizen you're serving, and what is the outcome we want them to have? We want to encourage efficiency, as I said, and design purposeful work. We're always looking for ways to innovate and constrain costs. And of course, every agency, when you're asked to cut, part of what happened, part of the way we were able to march down our costs and get the general fund smaller, at the same time services were going up, is because agencies did a great job of prioritizing. This is the stuff we can stop doing, this is the stuff we need to start doing, and we need to do this, and this is where we need. So the ability to reallocate within each of your own budgets to the best and highest return on investment is a key part of this budget guideline process. So again, and we also want to make sure that we're providing the adequate resources to continue all these essential programs. Next up is going to be Susan Sisk, who's going to represent all of this great work and give a preliminary revenue forecast, because of course during the strat review and during the budgeting process people focus on costs, but we've got something else to deal with in our state still, which is highly volatile, which is revenue. Susan will present the current revenue forecast, which I think is conservative. That revenue forecast will get updated multiple times before we actually get to January and start doing the appropriation. So we don't need to spend a lot of time on it today, but I'd say that we're from the starting point, we're doing it from a very conservative standpoint. So again, I want to thank all of you for being here today. After Susan is done, Susan and I will stand for questions related to the budget guidelines. But please help me welcome OMB Director Susan Sisk.
Good morning. I want to thank all of you for being here today as we kick off the budget cycle for the 25-27 biennium. I would also like to extend a heartfelt thank to our OMB budget analysts for their dedication and expertise as we work through the executive budget process. Becky Uhlberg, Steph Gullickson, Larry Martin, Renee Bloms, and Stephanie Johnson. So we're going to start with the revenue projections for oil and general fund taxes, and then we're going to move into the details of the budget guidelines and budget request framework. As most of you know, our forecast process begins by working with Moody's to develop a range of estimates based on national and North Dakota data. Then the Revenue Forecasting Advisory Council meets to review these estimates and to provide input. This group is made up of people from the main industries in North Dakota, both within and outside of state government, who have the insight to inform the forecast, and we're very appreciative of them. As the governor said, the forecast I'm going to talk about today is preliminary. It's a result of that process. We'll be updating it 2 more times during the course of the budget development work, then a final time when the legislature is in session in 2025. So although the economy has stabilized a bit since the last budget was prepared, there's still a lot of uncertainty, particularly in a year with a presidential election. So go ahead, Danny. Based on the input of the oil industry experts on our advisory council and what Moody's is seeing, projections for oil are fairly flat. So for the current biennium, the legislative forecast was for 1.1 million barrels of oil per day, with an estimated price of $70 a barrel for 2024 and $62 for 2025. So we have been running above that at an average of 1.2 million barrels a day, and the average price has been around 72. However, our discount from WTI to get the oil to market has increased from about $3 to $4 to about $7 to $8, and that's due primarily to the Trans-Canadian pipeline putting pressure on that market. So for the forecast, we are looking at 1.2 million barrels of oil per day at a price of $65 for 2025, $62 for 2026. There continues to be a lot of volatility and risk around oil in the market with elections, international relations. Locally, we're still waiting on a ruling for the Dakota Access Pipeline, so we feel that this represents a reasonable forecast at this time. Like the governor said, it might be conservative, but we will be updating it. So converting those numbers into revenues, the state's oil tax revenue is a function of price and production, with the state tax equal to 10% of the value. Production has remained very stable and will likely result in oil tax collections of $5.4 billion this biennium. This is ahead of the legislative forecast of $5.1 billion, and based on our current forecast, we are looking at very flat oil tax revenues into 25 and 27, just a very small increase. So now let's move into the general fund projections. We'll start with sales and use tax. This is our largest general fund tax type, accounting for about half of our general fund tax and fee revenue. So after that correction in 2021 from the pandemic and the recovery in 2022 and 23, we're back to modest increases. We are projecting just a slight decrease heading into 2025, and that's really driven by a couple of things in North Dakota, primarily housing, with construction permits being very low and interest rates high. And although the ag industry is still fairly upbeat, major crop prices are down from where they were a year ago. Motor vehicle excise taxes are also forecasted to be flat. So this is an area that saw prices increase during the pandemic due to a shortage in supply and is now right-sized, and in fact, supply is now greater than demand, so we aren't seeing an increase in this area. If you remember in the last session, 50% of revenue from this tax was transferred to the Flexible Transportation Fund for investments to help drive the economy forward. That bar shaded in light teal is total collections, and the dark teal is how much is flowing into the general fund. Very flat. We're not seeing any increases there. Individual income tax. So we saw a big decrease from 23 to 24 due to the changes in the tax brackets and rates. Going forward, we'll see some increases. Wages and personal income are increasing, so that we're seeing that reflected here. But again, fairly flat, small increases in individual income tax revenues. And then the last one is corporate income tax. So this is somewhat influenced by the economic conditions in North Dakota and outlook for oil, but it's really more of a function of Moody's outlook for the national economy and overall corporate profits. We did see a big correction from 23 to 24 and another small one into 25. Again, that's stemming from the pandemic. Going forward, we also expect these numbers to be very flat. So this slide shows the combined total of those 4 tax types that flow into the general fund. These 4 tax types are about 75% of our general fund tax and fee revenue. You can see we're projecting just a slight increase for 25-27. The shorter shaded bar is the original legislative forecast of $3.6 billion, and the taller shaded bar includes individual income tax and the motor vehicle tax that were moved out of the general fund, so we can have that apples to apples comparison from 23 to 25. Again, those funds were used on projects to help drive the economy forward, to put money back in the citizens' pockets. We're running ahead of our current legislative forecast in all 4 of these areas, in part because oil numbers are higher than the forecast, and that is a big driver for all of these. So now we've talked about the forecast, and we kind of set the stage for our guidelines, so let's talk about our base budget calculation. So from your current total appropriation, we're going to subtract out any one-time items to get to your current ongoing spending level. As the governor said, we're going to be adding in specific IT rate increases. We are also adding in what was put in OMB's budget for the FTE pool, plus the amount that was underfunded in agency budgets for the total amount that was removed from your appropriation to get to your base budget. So during strategy reviews, we heard from virtually every agency that they felt the FTE pool was simply burdensome, had absolutely no positive impact on their agency. It's creating a lot of work with no value. So that gets you to your base budget. So we're also asking for a 3% reduction for agencies with $10 million or more of general and $10 million more of special funds. So although our state is doing well financially, we are above our current forecast. We have our rainy day funds in place. The forecast forward is very flat, and we have a variety of needs to be addressed, which will require prioritizing and refocusing resources. So the net effect of these, we've added some things back into your budget. We've added in the IT costs. We've added in FTE pool. And then with the 3% reduction, we believe it's going to be the starting point is going to be flat overall. May vary slightly by agency, but overall, it's going to get us to a flat starting point. Again, you've heard us say this time and time again, but we're looking to reprioritize, stop doing the things that don't add value, cut red tape and barriers, focus on citizen outcomes, and be innovative, which is going to help us drive efficiencies. So once again, you'll be given the opportunity to submit proposals that may require resources above the base level in the form of decision packages. During the strategy review sessions, we heard many great ideas for transformation and improvement. We want to encourage you to reallocate existing resources whenever possible, but we know many of these ideas will require additional resources. There may be long-term savings and efficiency gains, but in many cases it takes an upfront investment to achieve those in the long term. So we'll once again be providing strategic themes that will allow us to pull individual agency requests into broad, comprehensive proposals, and the end result will be an executive budget that is strategy-based and outcome-focused. It will give us the ability to connect individual agency proposals to a broad, statewide strategy that connects agencies to a common theme and shared outcomes. This budget timeline will be familiar to you. So we've already completed the strategy reviews and the preliminary revenue forecast development. And over the next few months, agencies will work on the development of their strategy-based budget proposals. A great first step is the training on the budget system that was put in place last biennium. There have been significant enhancements put in place at your request. And so we have training scheduled for next week. If you can't attend, there will be a recording posted on the budget website on Team ND. The statutory deadline for submitting your budget proposal to OMB is July 15th, so that should be your goal. We do have the ability to grant extensions to that deadline when it is necessary, as you know. From the time you submit your budget, we'll review, analyze your proposals, and use the strategy-based themes to tie those proposals together into cross-cutting strategies. That work will be completed in time to release the budget to the legislature at the December organizational session. So I want to thank you for being here today, in person or online. On behalf of the OMB budget team, we look forward to working with all of you in the months ahead as we partner to build a budget for the 25-27 biennium. And I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time, or you can reach out to me directly. Any questions I can answer? And we still have the governor here as well.
Based on this 3% reduction starting place, are there going to be any pay increases built into the budget for state employees this next year? Because it sounds like we're cutting back, and I think people would maybe expect a raise with all this inflation.
To be determined, so that when we look at the whole budget overall, we'll take a look at all those items. We made a lot of progress this last time with this total market equity, but we still have some work to do, so that is definitely going to be one of the things that we'll take a look at when we look at the overall budget proposal after we get them, all the agency submissions.
I'll just add on to that is to create space to be able to do the raises we did last time was we found efficiencies in other places. I mean, you have to imagine when you've got this many retirements coming, if we have the baby boomers retiring, if we can figure out a way to get the work done with fewer people, we need to think about a state government that has less but higher paid team members. And to justify the higher pay, it's not just market rates, but it's also, can we create this purposeful work where they actually have a job that's adding a bunch of value, as opposed to doing paperwork that could be automated, because that's not good for the citizens and it's not good for the team member. If we're not putting them in a spot where they can really do what they came to state government to do, which is make a difference in people's lives.
And just to add on to that, since we're trying to do more with less people, does that mean we might be seeing some layoffs at the state level?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's going to be any need for layoffs, not with the demographic thing. I mean, we've got positions open all over the state that we can't fill right now, so we're in the opposite situation. I mean, we're fighting to hang on to people that we have, sometimes when our pay structure is less than what the private sector is, and we're struggling to fill positions sometimes as well. And so part of what we've got to do as we go through the process with the legislature is help legislature understand how fast the labor markets have changed and what have we got to do to make sure that we're getting the people we need to not just do the work, but do the work well. Dave?
Are you going to continue to promote telework as much as possible?
Well, I don't know if you want to answer, but I'd say the telework has been something that has been agency by agency among the electeds. The electeds can really set their own pace. The executive branch and the judicial branch and the legislative branch have got their own sets of rules. So within the agencies that cabinet agencies in particular, we've been a little more coordinated in working with all of them, but it does vary by agencies, because in some places it makes sense, because when you're saying telework, that implies that the work might be, they should all be in Bismarck. Well, it turns out, I mean, if most of the banking, for example, is in Fargo, then having all the bank examiners live in Bismarck, we're just spending money having them drive down the highway. And so there are positions where if we can get people to live in other cities in North Dakota closer to where they're actually doing their work, that makes sense. And so I think there's been a shift in awareness that not all state jobs need to be in Bismarck, and there's certain jobs like whether legal and nursing and IT and others. There are other markets that are in our own state that have a higher supply of people that we may be able to tap into. So I think we've seen what might be considered remote, but they're actually just working, in my mind, closer to where the customers we're serving. Any other, no other questions? Again, thank you all for being here, and those are watching online, thanks for tuning in. And again, thanks to OMB, NDIT, and the HR and Governor's Office team that all did all the work to this point to get us through those strat reviews, and thanks to all the agencies that participated with a lot of innovation and energy during those strat reviews. But with that, thanks for coming today, and I guess the next stop will be when we actually are, well, we'll have all the work with all the agencies between now and then, but we'll be releasing the budget. Lieutenant Governor Miller and myself will be doing that in early December. So look forward to that. Thank you.